There you go. Okay. All right. So um, the chapter two, section two starts us with the structures of ecosystems. Um, so again, like I kind of mentioned, the stuff yesterday, um, gave us a lot of like the definitions, right, of different biotic, abiotic, and then different kind of like categories or groupings of stuff within ecosystems. So now we're kind of drilling down to be a little more specific about the different parts of the ecosystem and things that make it up and stuff like that. So we're starting here with what are called trophic categories. The word trophic, as it has in your notes, means feeding. So essentially, these are categorizing organisms by what they eat within an ecosystem. So you can see we've got, excuse me, we've got uh, producers and then consumers, which I've split into two separate here, primary consumers and secondary consumers, and then detritus feeders and decomposers. Okay, so just so you know, on your, because this is kind of confusing, if people have questions, but the three main trophic categories, um, so we got like four here, but like in that case, we're talking about producers, consumers is one thing, and then detritus feeders and decomposers. Okay. All right. Now, again, I think I mentioned this in the video lecture yesterday, but as we go through this stuff, you guys will probably, this is stuff that you probably had before at some point, just, some extent, quite familiar with it. So if I skip over something or go too fast, assuming you know it, just let me know and I'll hit it real quick or whatever. So, producer category. The first level on the biomass pyramid, which won't make much sense right now, we'll get to that. What are producers? They are organisms that use photosynthesis to convert solar energy to chemical energy. This level of organism are referred to as autotrophs. Right? If we break down the word autotrophs, troph is from the trophic, we already said refers to feeding, right? Anybody want to guess what auto refers to? Like auto is self. So, so auto here is referring to self-feeding. So it's basically things that make their own energy, things that make their own energy from inorganic parts of the environment. Okay. So examples we have of these grasses, flowers, trees, algae, plankton, things like that are examples of producers. Okay. All right. Then we hit the consumer category, and um, we split the consumers into two categories here, and you can actually split it into more. Your book talks about something else, but another way of doing it. But these are the two main ways to split it. We have what are called primary consumers. The second level on the biomass pyramid. Again, we'll get to that. These eat only from the producer category, nothing else. These are what are called herbivores. So, you guys know what herbivore refers to? If you break that down, herbs refers to plants, and vores essentially means eaters. So you've got plant eaters. Okay. Um, this level organism are referred to as heterotrophs. Anybody want to guess what hetero? Many are different. Yep. Yeah, many are different. So, like if you think about, if you remember from biology, heterozygous and homozygous, like the genes and stuff, the heterozygous where they're different, right? So heterotrophs essentially mean other or different. So these are things that feed on other organisms. They get their energy from other organisms. Okay. Examples of primary consumers, the herbivores: giraffes, deer, rabbits, cows, squirrels, all examples. Okay. Um, all right, then we go to the secondary consumer level. Uh, so, okay, let me do secondary consumer, then I'll explain something here with the highlighting. So the secondary consumers are actually found on the third level of the biomass pyramid. These are organisms that eat from both the producer and the primary consumer categories. So they'll eat from both. Okay, now, excuse me. Your book says that like you can break this even more. Like your book says something about secondary consumers eating from um, basically ones that will eat uh, from the other category, and then like tertiary are only ones that'll eat from only the secondary level. Like these will eat from both producer and primary categories, and then you get some that'll eat from the secondary category, like food chain type stuff. But I don't really worry about that. I just split them into primary and secondary. So secondary will eat from both producer and primary categories, or one or the other, like one or the other. So we've got carnivores, carne referring to meat eating, so meat eaters. They eat only other consumers, both primary and secondary. So carnivores would be examples: lions, wolves, sharks, snakes, things that eat other consumers. Um, so wait a minute. Yeah. Okay, primary consumers because herbivores, right? Okay, yeah, they eat only other consumers. Omnivores. Anybody want to take a guess what omni means? Omni means like all. They use it in religion, like omnipotent, or which means like all powerful, uh, or omniscient, which means all knowing. So omni means all. So basically, have all eaters. They eat both producers and consumers. Okay, so birds. You might not think of birds as, but like birds, we know will eat like berries and stuff like that, right? They'll also eat like insects, worms. Okay, so humans obviously will eat both plants and other animals. Bears, same thing. They'll eat stuff like fish, but also eat berries and fruits and stuff. A lot of your uh, amphibians and reptiles are omnivores. They'll eat like insects, other small animals, as well as like plants, fruits and vegetables, things like that as well. So those are omnivores. All right. This level, the secondary consumer, are also referred to as heterotrophs. Okay, now if you notice the highlighting I have here, um, we have so I highlighted some in orange and some in yellow. So the reason I did this is because the yellow is sort of another way to differentiate the types of trophic categories. Those are the you can actually do it in two really general categories as either autotrophs or heterotrophs. So in your book, it actually has a should have had it open to this page. It's on the homework. I actually said like page 35 because here name and define the two most general trophic categories. So if you look on page 35 here, so we have the three categories that we talked about, right? Let's see if I can get it without. There we go. Producers, consumers, and detritus feeders and decomposers, right? Well, you can also do like two more generic categories: autotrophs and heterotrophs. So like producers are autotrophs, and then basically everything else, the consumers and the detritus feeders and decomposers, are all heterotrophs. So your categories for number 7 on the homework are going to be these two are what they're talking about: the autotrophs and heterotrophs. Okay. All right. So that's another way to sort of classify. And then if you look at the orange highlighted words, herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, that's actually another way to categorize based on um, like what they feed on as well. But the herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores are just for the consumers. That's how, like, that's a more specific categories within the consumers. Okay, does that make sense? Any guys got any questions yet? No, good. Okay. All right. So the third category, that word is detritus. Detritus, feeders, and decomposers. Okay. Um, these are also found on the third, typically on the third level of the biomass pyramid. Um, they feed on dead plant and animal matter. They feed on dead plant and animal matter. Now, they actually break up this category into primary and secondary as well. Um, and it's similar to what they do to the consumers. The primary are ones that feed directly on detritus, uh, referred to as decomposers. So examples of this would be like maggots, earthworms, termites, ants, fungi, the stuff that feeds on the dead plant matter, um, and animal matter as well, like the dead. And then you do have a category, and to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure why they. I don't know why really they put the excuse me, and why they put this under this category. Uh, and why they're not just considered a secondary consumer. To be honest, I don't know, but secondary detritus feeders and decomposers are organisms that feed primarily on the primary decomposer. So, like mites, millipedes, and beetles will feed on these others. So I don't really. There must be something to that. I haven't been able to find it yet, but like why they don't put it in here, but that's how they break that up. All right. Now, what what is the role that detritus feeders and decomposers play in the ecosystem? Well, that's right here, and I've asterisked it because this is really important. Detritus feeders and decomposers allow the nutrient cycle to continue by returning valuable minerals and nutrients to the soil. So we've got I don't know if you want to call it like cycle of life or whatever. The whole idea though, right? We get producers using minerals and nutrients from the soil and energy from the sun and stuff to make their to grow and to grow, get larger, to live, right? So they're turning those things into actual oh um, it's well, I guess it's in biomass, into biomass, like actual living stuff. Then you've got the consumers, which are then using the producers and other consumers for energy by eating and consuming them, right? Well, what happens when the consumers? How does the food source for the producers get replenished? Well, what's the food source for producers? It's minerals, nutrients, water, and sunlight, right? So water and sunlight, well, water can run out, but in general, like you have plenty of water usually, and sunlight is fine. So minerals and nutrients are the things that need to be replenished, right? Well, that comes in here. When things die, the detritus feeders and decomposers are the ones that actually break that stuff down, turn it back into minerals and nutrients to return it back to the producers. Right. Interesting. Have you guys heard of Chernobyl, the Russian nuclear plant, right, that had the meltdown back in the 80s? When that happened, the resulting radioactive fallout from that, uh, it killed all the living organisms within, like, I don't know how many mile radius, but a large area around it. The radiation from that, the core explosion and stuff, literally killed, like, basically essentially like every living thing for miles around. Um, and there's actually some forest there that for many years um, was like it was sort of like it was like a graveyard forest. Like all everything was dead, but nothing decomposed, nothing broke down. So it was all dead, but it was almost like it was frozen in time, sort of, because guess what? All the detritus feeders and decomposers were dead too. So there was literally nothing to break down the dead animal and plant matter and break it down and turn it back into nutrient, soil, whatever. So um, if you didn't have these, like, it would break that chain. Like you can't return that stuff. You'd literally it's weird because most of these things are so small we don't notice them. We know something like you'll see like maggots and stuff like that, right? Earthworm, but like when we see like if we leave food out somewhere and it starts to break down or what we don't really think of it. We don't necessarily think of mold as being something living. It is, but we don't necessarily think of that like breaking it down and returning it into soil or whatever. But like that's really what's happening. And if you didn't have that, it would sit there forever. Um, and you can find other sort of examples of this, like you see stuff on the internet about like that one guy that had the Twinkie for like however many decades or whatever, right? And it still looked like a Twinkie. Well, why? Well, one of the main, I mean, yeah, part of it's probably the preservatives and stuff that are in it, but like the other thing is like anything that would break it down and decompose it can't get to it, like it's sealed. Um, Now, usually that's not perfect. Like we know that you know bags and things like that. The air, there probably was some stuff in it, but yeah, it'll last for if you don't have something to break it down, bacteria and something, anything like to create mold or anything like that, whatever to break it down, it'll essentially just stay that way forever. Um, so detritus feeders and decomposers are really super important to continuing that nutrient cycle. Okay. All right. Questions on any of the categories or good? Okay. Um, then we have a couple of definitions here at the bottom. Food chain, which you probably heard before, I'm assuming. Uh, a food chain shows the transfer of energy and material through a series of organisms as each one is fed upon by the next, right? So let me see if your book has I don't know if your book has an example of a food chain. Um, so we know what a food chain is, though. Like, um, a rabbit. So grass is eaten by a rabbit. The rabbit is eaten by a hawk. A hawk is eaten by a coyote. The coyote is eaten by a bear. That's a food chain, right? Like one animal eating another, exchanging energy, whatever. Okay. Now, a food web. What is a food web? Well, it's very similar to what it sounds like. It's essentially all the food chains within an ecosystem put together. And it looks kind of like a web. So your book does have examples of these. It's on page 36. So hold on, let me put that in there, hopefully. It's kind of hard with these pages being all shiny, but okay, so that's relatively decent. So this would be representative of a food web. Like you can see some of the different like interconnectedness, but like multiple things go to multiple other things, right? Like the rabbit, uh, the rabbit will eat the leaves. It'll eat the uh, whatever those things are, cattails or whatever. It'll eat like the corn from the field or whatever. Um, Things that will eat the rabbit, the fox, the hawk, humans, or whatever. So like it's all of the different interconnectedness, the interconnected food chains. So all of them together for an ecosystem. Make sense? All right. And then the last definition from the first page of the notes here is biomass. So I think I explained this in the previous video lecture too, but bio typically as a prefix refers to life. Mass literally means mass, okay, of something. So biomass literally refers to the mass of the living content. So the total combined net weight or mass of all the organisms at each trophic level. So if you're talking about biomass in general, I have at each trophic level on here, but the biomass for an area would technically just be the total combined net weight of all the living organisms. Okay. Now, when we talk about biomass pyramid, we're breaking them into trophic levels. But so, um, so like literally, if you had a ginormous scale and piled all the living stuff in an area and onto it, that would be representative of the biomass. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the next page. This is the biomass pyramid that I've been referencing in some of the categories there. Okay. The biomass pyramid shows relationships between the total mass of organisms for each trophic or feeding level. Okay. So the biomass pyramid that our book uses splits it into 3 levels. And I've got them labeled. I think the ones I gave you guys have these labels on them, right? Yeah, the producers and it's got the stuff in the middle here? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so producers is the first level. Primary consumers or herbivores is the second level. And then secondary consumers and detritus feeders and decomposers is the third level. Okay. So, as you can see, I've got the, see the 100 times, 10 times, and 1 time? So this is the mass relationship between the levels. In other words, if we look at the like a secondary consumer, there would be 10 times as much mass for the primary consumers as there are for the secondary. And then there's 10 times the primary or 100 times the secondary of the producers. Now, why do you think this is? Why do you think there's 100 times, in terms of the mass, 100 times more producers than secondary consumers, or 10 times more than the primary? Why do you think there's so much more at this level? Okay. You're right, there is. There's a lot more, like literally things to eat, stuff like that at that level. But why? Let me ask you this. Okay, so give me an example of a secondary consumer. Any secondary consumer. Riley, give me one. I don't care what.
Rabbit.
Okay. Oh, rabbit would be primary. A wolf. Okay. So a wolf. So let's talk about this. So you said wolf, and then you had also mentioned rabbit too, which is a primary, right? So if you physically think about, so we're talking about a wolf at the secondary and a rabbit at the primary. If you think about them physically, like I know, like I'm not talking about like fangs and stuff like that, but I'm talking about their biomass, their size. What's the main what's the difference? Rabbit smaller, right? Considerably smaller, right? Okay, so one thing now, what we got to think about is like the biomass So we think well we'd have a lot more here because the wolf is bigger, right? So we'd have a lot more here. So you think it'd be the opposite. But think about the numbers of them now, just in general. Aren't there a ton more rabbits than wolves typically? So as you go up, there's fewer of them, right? So that's part of it because there's fewer. There's more of the things that's kind of along the lines of what you were mentioning, right? So now, what's the other part of this? Well, this comes into this stuff that I have written on the side here. Every time you move a level on the biomass pyramid, or every time you have a feeding relationship, one thing eating something else, in terms of the mass, there is 90% mass lost and only 10% of the mass gets transferred into biomass. So like um if we eat I have that in here. Okay. So um so what this means is if we eat I don't know, if you were to eat a 5 pound chicken, you don't gain 5 pounds. Okay, you would gain somewhere around 0.5 pounds. Now, yes, this is a very, very simplified, this is a very simplified concept. There's actually a lot more that goes into it, but in general. So why don't you, what is it, if you're talking about consuming a 5 pound chicken, why wouldn't you gain 5 pounds? Any ideas? Okay, good. So some of that gets used for other uh, bodily functions and converted to energy and stuff, right? Good. So that's one. So I don't know if you guys might want to write this on the back or something. Um, so let's see how I can do this without giving them away. I want you guys to try to figure them out, maybe. Okay. Some mass is broken down and used for energy and other bodily functions. So these are reasons for mass loss. Reasons why not 100% of it is converted. Some mass is broken down and used for energy and other bodily functions. So let me ask you guys this: if your family eats chicken, or think about Thanksgiving dinner, okay, you got a turkey. Do you eat the entire turkey? Yeah. No. There's stuff left over, right? Like the bones, organs, maybe. We know we didn't eat the feathers. It was prepared before that. Well, the feathers, the bones, the organs, all that stuff is part of the biomass of the turkey. So part of it is that even in consumption, we don't animals and things eating usually don't consume the entire organism, right? Um, so another one, I should have done this in a different order. So I've got it listed as the third one. You can put it as the second one. All right, incomplete consumption. Right? We don't eat everything. So some of it doesn't get consumed. So if you've got a whatever, I don't know, 20-pound turkey, you're not eating all 20 pounds of that. Okay? So that's another reason. Any guesses on the third? We're talking about eating, right? Eating and getting energy, stuff like that. Not to be super gross or anything like this, but you have Say you have corn or something on your Thanksgiving meal. Sometimes it just, yeah, your body doesn't break it down, doesn't use it, just passes through, right? Anyway, so some of the biomass, even if it gets consumed, gets expelled as waste, right? Um, so some of that biomass we are gonna not turn into biomass of ourselves, but expel as waste. So there's other things too, but like this is these are some of the main reasons. Main reasons for mass loss. Now remember, we're talking about mass loss from one level to another as we consume, as we consume something to get energy. So some of the mass is expelled as waste. Make sense? Okay. Now let's. So what this means is you have a 90% mass loss and only a 10% mass transfer as you go. So now, does anybody understand why there's 100 times more here? Because you have to have way more down here to support up here because you're not getting it all transferred, right? So if we go back to our wolf and rabbit example, um, if I mean again, just keep in mind this is a very very simplified. We know it doesn't work like this totally, but the idea is say you have a 100-pound wolf. Well, would that 100 pounds of wolf have been formed by just eating 100 pounds of rabbit? No, like you would have to eat and consume. I mean, way more than 100, like than 100 pounds of rabbit, because you're not, the wolf's not eating all of it, and it's pooping some of it out and whatever. Like it's through the waste. So generically, you'd have to have 1,000 pounds of rabbit to make a 100-pound wolf. Okay, so I did, you might want to jot this down, or maybe not. You might be able to get the idea, but like, so I did I did something here just to show you the concept of the biomass pyramid, like to kind of drive home the idea. So let's say we had 150. Hold on, don't want to give that away yet. Okay, so say we have a 150-pound human. Okay. Now, say that human was eating. You went down to New Orleans, as they say, and you ate alligator. Tastes like chicken. Uh, Actually, it does taste pretty good. I've eaten it before. I had alligator jerky. It was decent, pretty good. So say they're eating alligator. Now, how much alligator would you have to eat to make a 150-pound person? Now, obviously, like they already are there, but like we're assuming like to get a 150-pound person, how much alligator would you have to eat to sustain that or to make the 150 pounds? Be 10 times, right? That's what the biomass is saying here. 10 times. So we would need we need 1,500 pounds of alligator to make or sustain 150 pounds of human, right? Now, say that 1,500 pounds of alligator was fed chicken. How many pounds of chickens would be necessary to create or sustain the 1,500 pounds of alligator? How much would it be? Good, 15,000. We need 15,000 pounds of chicken. Okay. Now, say the chicken ate insects. I see where I'm going with this. Caleb, how many pounds of insects? There you go, 150,000 or 150,000 pounds of insects would be needed. And then say the insects ate plants, right? And other producers. We'd need 1,500,000 pounds of plants and other substances. So in order to support the things above, because of this 90% loss and only 10% transfer, in order to support above, you have to have 10 times on the level below. So each level you go up, you have to have this. So look at everything that would be needed to sustain. If that was the path that would need to be sustained, a 150-pound person. Okay. Now, so one of the concepts that I'm trying to drive home and why I did this is the why are the low like why is the producer category so much larger? It's because of the energy or the mass loss as they're eaten. You need a much larger 10 times actually each time much larger amount to sustain the organisms that eat higher up on the pyramid. Okay, so that's one thing. Now the second thing is, especially when we're talking about us as humans, is you talk about what it takes to sustain us. So if you think about like say, say if all we ate was like alligator, something like this, it's going to take all of this just to get enough up here to sustain us, right? Well, what if, and again, don't mistake me, you guys and people listening on. I am not saying that you should go vegetarian, but the concept of what if somebody was vegetarian? Okay, what if humans only ate from the producer category? Well, again, very simplistic here, but a 150-pound human could be created or sustained by 1,500 pounds of fruit and vegetables. Then, well, that's a lot less resources that are needed to sustain, right? So, one of the other sort of lessons of the biomass pyramid is the higher up an organism feeds on the biomass pyramid, the more resources it takes to sustain it. Okay, I'll say that one more time. The higher up on the biomass pyramid an organism feeds, the more overall resources it takes to sustain it and keep it alive. Make sense? Okay. I think that covers everything that we're going to cover today. The rest of the notes we will cover. So let me